In the middle of a giant city's chaos, a simple act of kindness changed two lives. A young guy with big dreams gave up his last coins to help a stranger. Little did he know, that woman was hiding a secret that would shake his whole world. Wasan's. The truth came out. He was shocked. Before you dive into this story of unlikely meetings and emotional twists, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. The heat was punishing the city when Robert Adams, a humble young man who divided his time between a restaurant and his engineering studies, saw his life completely change. Sweat was running down his face as he cleaned the last tables at Joe's Corner, a small restaurant in downtown Chicago where he had worked for 3 years. That Friday afternoon, the manager had asked him to stay beyond his shift to cover for another employee who was absent. Reluctantly, Robert accepted. He needed the extra money to pay his overdue tuition. "You can go, Robert. Thanks for your help today," said Joe, the establishment's owner, a kind-hearted gentleman with graying hair and a friendly smile. "You deserve to rest this weekend." "Thank you, Joe. See you Monday," Robert replied, hanging up his apron before hurrying out. Vitty. Clock showed 7:40 p.m., and he had only 20 minutes to reach the bus stop and catch the last bus that would take him to college, where he had an important class on structural calculations. He walked quickly through the busy downtown streets, dodging pedestrians, feeling the weight of his backpack. In it, he carried not only books and notebooks, but also the weight of his responsibilities. At 25, Robert helped support the home where he lived with his sick mother and 2 younger siblings. He arrived breathlessly at the bus stop, just in time to see his bus approaching. It was then that he noticed an elegant but visibly distressed woman frantically searching through her sophisticated purse. She wore an impeccable women's suit and high heels that betrayed her social status, but her expression was one of pure helplessness. "This can't be happening," she muttered to herself as the bus approached. "Is something wrong?" Robert asked, his instinct to help speaking louder than his hurry. "I left my wallet at the office," she replied with a trembling voice. "I have no way to pay for the fare, and I urgently need to get to the hospital." Without thinking twice, Robert took from his pocket his last coins, money he had saved to buy a sandwich at college, since he hadn't been able to eat lunch properly. "Here, this should be enough for a fare." The woman hesitated for a moment, her dark brown eyes meeting his. There was something in that look, a mixture of surprise and gratitude that Robert would never forget. "I can't accept this. Please take it. You seem to need it more than I do right now." The bus stopped, opening its doors. With one last grateful look, she accepted the coins and boarded. Robert stood there watching the vehicle pull away, aware that he would miss his class. With a resigned sigh, he began walking to the alternative bus stop, which was 15 minutes away. It would be a long night. Little did he know that the stranger was Helen Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Construction, one of the largest civil construction companies in the country. Accustomed to moving financial mountains with a simple signature, Helen was, at that moment, deeply touched by the gesture of a stranger. A gesture small in value but immense in meaning. 3 days later, while Robert was cleaning tables at Joe's Corner, he was surprised by the entrance of a customer he immediately recognized. It was the woman from the bus stop, now even more elegant, in a navy blue executive dress, her black hair tied in an impeccable bun. "May I sit down?" she asked, indicating an empty table near the window. "Of course, make yourself comfortable," Robert replied, intrigued by the coincidence. "What would you like?" "A coffee, and if possible, a little of your time," she smiled, extending her hand. "I'm Helen Montgomery." "Robert Adams," he replied, shaking her hand, noticing the contrast between his calloused fingers and her soft, well-cared-for skin. At that moment, without either of them being able to imagine, the seed of a friendship was planted that would grow at an unexpected pace. Helen asked him to sit with her after his shift, something that initially made Robert uncomfortable. After all, what could a woman like that possibly want with someone like him? "I came to return your money and thank you," she explained, handing him an envelope. It was a gesture that meant a lot that day. Robert refused the envelope with a gentle smile. "You don't need to return anything. It was just a helping hand." Then allow me to repay you in another way. Coffee? Tomorrow after your shift? The proposal caught Robert by surprise. Why would a woman like her be interested in having coffee with a waiter? Curiosity spoke louder, and he accepted. That coffee turned into many others. Conversation after conversation, they discovered worlds as different as they were complementary. Helen, fascinated by his simplicity and sincerity. Robert, touched by the attention and genuine interest she showed in getting to know him. In their conversations, Helen revealed fragments of her life. With degrees in business administration and civil engineering, she had taken over her father's company after he stepped back due to health problems. She lived in a luxurious apartment in Lincoln Park, but confessed to Robert that, despite all material comfort, she often felt lonely. "Everything. I have came with a price," she said once, absently stirring her coffee cup. "Genuine relationships are rare when you carry the surname I do." Robert, in turn, shared stories of his childhood in the South Side, the effort to win a scholarship, and the difficulties in reconciling work and college. He spoke passionately about his dream of becoming an engineer and building quality, affordable housing. "I want to design houses where people like my family can live with dignity," he explained, his eyes shining with determination. What began as a gesture of kindness transformed into something unexpected. Helen, 32, used to meetings with executives and investors, found herself anxious for the meetings with Robert. For the first time in years, someone saw her beyond her position or surname, saw Helen, the woman behind the executive. On a Sunday afternoon, about a month after they met, Helen surprised Robert with an unusual invitation. A walk through Chinatown. He, who knew every corner of that historic place, felt proud to guide her through the colorful streets, showing her small, authentic restaurants and craft shops that tourists rarely discovered. That day, something changed between them. As they walked under Chinatown's characteristic red lanterns, their hands accidentally touched. Robert felt an electric current run through his body, but immediately pulled back. Helen noticed the gesture and, with a shy smile that in no way resembled the confident executive, intertwined her fingers with his. "This is crazy, isn't it?" she asked, her voice just a whisper. "Completely," agreed Robert, squeezing her hand lightly. What seemed improbable blossomed that afternoon. Spontaneous laughter, shared stories, ice cream shared in the central square. Helen experienced eating octopus skewers on the street for the first time, making Robert burst into laughter when she made a face after trying the spicy sauce. "Are you laughing at your boss?" she joked. "Boss?" He raised an eyebrow, amused. "Well, technically I own a construction company. I could hire a promising engineer like you someday." The comment was made in jest, but it brought to light the reality that both had been trying to forget in those moments together. They belonged to completely different worlds. As the sun set, painting the sky in orange hues, Helen and Robert sat on a bench in the square. The silence between them was comfortable, as if they had known each other for years, not weeks. "I never thought I would feel like this," confessed Helen, looking at the horizon. "Like what?" "Free." She turned to face him, vulnerability evident in her gaze. "With you, I don't need to be the Helen Montgomery everyone expects. I can just be me." Robert felt the weight of those words. In his simplicity, he had offered her something that all her money and power couldn't buy: authenticity. And she, without realizing it, had given him something equally precious: the feeling of being valued for who he was, not for what he had or represented. At that moment, when their eyes met in the Chicago sunset, something silent was promised between them, something that transcended social classes, different backgrounds, and others' expectations. Something that both knew would be tested in every possible way in the days to come. The return to reality came when Helen's cell phone rang insistently. It was her personal assistant, reminding her of an international video conference scheduled for that night. With visible reluctance, she said goodbye to Robert. "This doesn't end here," she promised, kissing him softly on the cheek. "I hope not," he answered, watching her get into a taxi that was waiting for her. As he walked to the bus stop, Robert tried to understand what was happening. How had the simple offer of a few coins at a bus stop transformed his life in this way? Was it possible that someone like Helen could really be interested in someone like him? His rational mind said no, that it was just a phase, a curiosity on her part. But his heart insisted that something true was being born there. Something that, like the structures he was learning to calculate in college, would need solid foundations to withstand the strong winds that would certainly come. What Robert didn't know was that at that same moment, inside the luxurious taxi, taking her back to her apartment, Helen was also reflecting on the unexpected paths her life was taking. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, connected to something beyond the corporate world that consumed her days. Taking her cell phone, she wrote a simple message to Robert. "Thank you for today, for showing me a world beyond the glass walls of my office." The answer came almost instantly. "Thank you for allowing me to show it to you. There's so much more I'd like to share with you." Helen smiled at the phone screen, feeling a comforting warmth in her chest. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test not only what they felt for each other, but also their own convictions about love, social class, and the true meaning of success. Because sometimes it's the smallest kindnesses, like a few coins given to a stranger at a bus stop, that change the course of an entire life. And both Robert and Helen were about to discover how deeply their lives would be transformed by that seemingly casual encounter. In the weeks that followed, the relationship between Robert and Helen flourished in carefully planned meetings to fit both of their tight schedules. For Robert, it was a juggling act between engineering classes, work at the restaurant, and caring for his family. For Helen, it meant escaping from corporate meetings, international video conferences, and business dinners that dominated her life. On a rainy Tuesday, Robert hurried through the downtown streets, protecting a small package with his worn jacket. He had arranged to meet Helen at a discreet cafe near the Chicago Theater, a location sufficiently away from her social circles so they could talk without being noticed. "Sorry I'm late," he said, shaking his wet hair as he entered the establishment. The bus took longer than usual with this rain. Helen, who was discreetly checking messages on her corporate cell phone, looked up and smiled. She wore simpler clothes than usual: jeans, a knit blouse, and a casual blazer, a conscious attempt not to draw attention. "Don't worry, I just got here too," she lied, having actually been waiting for 20 minutes, but not wanting to make him feel guilty. Robert handed her the small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's for you. It's nothing special, but—" Helen carefully unwrapped the gift, revealing a small handcrafted notebook with a blue cover, decorated with geometric patterns. "It's beautiful, Robert," she said, running her fingers over the texture of the cover. "I found it at a craft fair near the college. The seller said it's made from recycled paper. I know you have thousands of electronic calendars and apps, but I thought maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe you could use it for more personal things. Things that don't belong to the corporate world." Helen felt a lump in her throat. It was a simple gift, probably cost less than the coffee they were drinking, but it carried a meaning that none of the expensive gifts she regularly received had ever had. "It's perfect," she whispered, holding his hand on the table. "Thank you for seeing me beyond the CEO." That small notebook became Helen's silent confidant. In it, she began to record thoughts, dreams, and memories of moments with Robert, things she would never share with her usual social circle. It was a space where she could be genuinely herself. In one of these meetings, as they walked through Lincoln Park after an art exhibition, Robert finally gathered the courage to ask something that had been bothering him. "Why me, Helen?" he asked, stopping by the lake. "You could be with anyone, someone of your level." Helen frowned, visibly bothered by the question. "What level would that be, Robert?" Her voice took on a defensive tone. "The level of people who only approach me for what I can offer, for my surname or bank account?" Robert realized he had touched a sensitive point. "I didn't mean to offend," he apologized. "It's just that, look at us. You studied at the best schools, travel the world, frequent places I only see in magazines. I'm a waiter studying engineering who lives in the South Side. Helen held his face between her hands, her eyes fixed on his geezer. That's exactly why I'm with you, Robert. Because you see me as a person, not as a walking asset. Because you care about things that really matter. Your family, your studies, your dreams of building a better world. She took a deep breath. Do you know how many times I've felt alone at parties full of people? Or empty after closing multi-million-dollar deals? Robert covered her hands with his, understanding that despite all the material differences, they shared something essential: the search for authentic connections. I'm sorry, he said. I think I'm still getting used to this. To us. Me. Too, admitted Helen with a smile. But I'm willing to try if you are. That night, for the first time, they exchanged a real kiss. Not a hesitant brush of lips or a kiss on the cheek, but a kiss that sealed the silent promise to explore together that unknown territory that opened before them. However, reality was quick to impose its challenges. 2 weeks later, Robert was waiting for Helen at a small pizzeria in Little Italy. They had arranged to have dinner there at 8 p.m., but it was already past 9 p.m. and she hadn't shown up or responded to his messages. Embarrassed by the pitying looks from the waiter, who had passed by several times to ask if he was still waiting, Robert was about to leave when his cell phone finally rang. Robert, forgive me, Helen's voice sounded exhausted. An emergency came up with a project in Boston and I couldn't warn you before. I'm on the plane now, we just landed. It's okay, he replied, trying to hide his disappointment. These things happen. No, it's not okay, she countered. I cancelled our meeting and left you waiting. That's not fair. Silence hung between them for a few seconds before Helen continued. Robert, my life is this chaos you're seeing. Emergencies, last-minute trips, responsibilities I can't simply ignore. I'll perfectly understand if you think it's not worth it. Robert observed the modest place where he was sitting. Checkered tablecloths, walls decorated with old photographs of Italy, the aroma of tomato sauce in the air. A world so distant from private jets and emergency meetings. And Miss Trying. The best pizza in Chicago with you, he replied, trying to lighten the tension. No way, let's just reschedule. On the other end of the line, Helen smiled, relieved by his understanding. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I'll be back the day after tomorrow. What Helen didn't tell at that moment was that the emergency had been a crisis meeting. A large housing project by Montgomery Construction in Boston was being investigated for possible environmental irregularities. Irregularities which, if confirmed, could not only tarnish the company's reputation, but also result in heavy fines and lawsuits. Meanwhile, Robert's life followed its course. The morning after the phone call, he was attentively attending his material resistance class when the professor mentioned the case that dominated the news. This is a classic example of what happens when profit takes precedence over ethics in engineering, commented the professor, showing slides of a large beachfront development. Montgomery Construction ignored studies that indicated a risk of landslides and proceeded with construction even after notifications from environmental agencies. Robert felt his stomach sink as he recognized the name of Helen's company projected on the slide. Around him, colleagues made indignant comments about greedy business people and unscrupulous corporations. This is why we need engineers with solid ethical principles, the professor continued. People willing to say no when projects put the environment or vulnerable communities at risk. The words echoed in Robert's mind for the rest of the day. Could it be that Helen was directly involved in those questionable decisions? The kind and attentive woman he had met seemed so distant from the image of the ruthless executive painted by the news and the professor. That night, unable to sleep, Robert was anxiously browsing reports about the case on his cell phone when he heard knocks on the door of the small room he shared with his younger brother. "Are you awake, Robert?" It was the voice of his mother, Cindy, a woman with a tired appearance but an affectionate look. "You can come in, Mom." Cindy sat on the edge of the bed, observing her son with that look that always seemed to see beyond appearances. "You've been different. Is something happening that you want to tell me about?" Robert hesitated. He hadn't mentioned Helen to the family. How to explain that he was getting involved with a woman who represented everything he had always criticized, the corporate power that often crushed the less fortunate? "It's just worry about the exams," he lied, avoiding her gaze. Cindy smiled, stroking her son's hair as she did when he was a child. "I met your father washing dishes at a restaurant where he was a cook," she said, surprising Robert with the change of subject. "Everyone said it wouldn't work out, that we were from worlds that were too different." Robert faced his mother, realizing that she knew more than she showed. "How did you know?" "A mother always knows, son," she smiled. "And that elegant lady who waited for you at the corner the other day didn't seem to be your college classmate." Robert blushed, remembering the day Helen had quickly passed by to see him after a class. He thought no one had noticed. "It's complicated to explain, Mum." "Love always is, son." Cindy squeezed his hand. "And just remember one thing. Differences in background, in money, all of that we can overcome. What can't be fixed is differences in values. If you believe in the same important things, fight for it. If not—" She left the sentence hanging. Her mother's words stayed with Robert in the days that followed. Values. That's what bothered him in the news about Montgomery construction. But the possibility that Helen might compromise ethical values for profit. When they finally reunited 3 days later, the atmosphere between them was visibly tense. Helen suggested a walk through Grant Park, a place where they could talk with some privacy. "You saw the news, didn't you?" she asked directly, as they walked beneath the century-old trees. "I saw," confirmed Robert. "My material. Resistance professor used your company's case as an example of what not to do in engineering." Helen stopped walking, closing her eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. "And you believe that? That I would be capable of approving a project knowing it could cause environmental damage?" Robert wanted to say no immediately, but doubt consumed him. "I want to believe you wouldn't, Helen, but given the evidence." "Evidence?" she interrupted him, her voice mixing hurt and indignation. "You didn't even ask for my version before judging me." Robert felt ashamed. She was right. "I'm asking you now," he said softly. Helen took a deep breath, leading him to a nearby bench. "That project was approved 2 years ago, even before I took over the company's presidency," she explained. "When the first risk reports arrived 4 months ago, I immediately ordered the suspension of construction for a complete reevaluation. But the news says—" "The news shows old documents and photos of construction sites that have already been halted." She opened her folder and showed Robert documents proving the suspension order signed by her. "I was in Boston precisely to cooperate with the investigations and present our damage mitigation plan. We're not running away from responsibility." Robert examined the documents, feeling relieved and simultaneously guilty for having doubted her. "Why didn't you explain this before?" "Because these are confidential company matters, Robert," she replied with a tired sigh. "And honestly, because I was afraid of your reaction. Afraid that you would see me as just another unscrupulous businesswoman." There was a moment of silence as both processed the situation. The trust, still fragile between them, had been tested and had almost not withstood. "I'm sorry for doubting you," Robert finally said. "And I'm sorry for not sharing something so important," she replied. "You need to understand something, Robert. I inherited a company with practices I don't always agree with. I'm trying to change it from within. Implement more ethical and sustainable policies, but it's a slow process. There will be times when my name will be linked to decisions I didn't make, but for which I now need to answer." Robert nodded, understanding the weight she carried. She wasn't simply the CEO of a large corporation. She was someone trying to reform a system of which she was part. "How can I help?" he asked. The question caught Helen by surprise. She was used to dealing with people who wanted something from her, not who offered genuine help. "Just trust me?" she asked with a fragile smile, "even when appearances suggest otherwise." Robert held her hands, making a silent promise to try. That conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. They had faced their first real crisis and survived. In the days that followed, Helen did something unprecedented. She invited Robert to get to know her world. The first test came. in the form of a charity dinner organized by the Association of Builders, a formal event where Helen would be honored for her sustainable housing project for low-income populations. "I'm sure you'll hate every minute of it," she joked on the phone, "but I'd really like you to be there with me." Robert accepted, even knowing he would be completely out of his comfort zone. On the night of the event, Helen sent a driver to pick him up along with a suit she had specially made for him, a gesture that Robert accepted after much insistence from her. The ballroom of the luxury hotel where the event was taking place was intimidating. Crystal chandeliers, elaborate flower arrangements, waiters serving champagne in delicate glasses. Robert felt like a fish out of water, aware of the curious looks he received while waiting for Helen in the lobby. When she finally appeared, wearing a long emerald green dress that enhanced her eyes, Robert momentarily forgot his discomfort. Helen walked directly to him, ignoring greetings from acquaintances along the way, and kissed him softly on the lips, a public gesture that did not go unnoticed. "You look beautiful," he managed to say, still dazed by the sight of her. "And you look absolutely elegant," she replied, slightly adjusting his tie. "Ready to enter the lion's den?" Robert laughed nervously, offering his arm to her. "With you? I think I'd face even dragons." What he didn't know was that that night would be just the first of many tests their relationship would face. Tests that would put to the test not only the nascent love between them, but also their most fundamental values and the very notion of who they were as individuals. Because in the elegant halls and corporate offices that made up Helen's world, as well as in the modest classrooms and small apartment in the South Side that constituted Robert's universe, powerful forces were moving. Forces that would not look kindly on the union between the heiress of a civil construction empire and an engineering student of humble origin. And as they crossed that hall together, arm in arm and with nervous smiles, neither Robert nor Helen could imagine how much they would need to fight for that improbable love to survive the storms approaching on the horizon. The glamour of the U-Mamendi charity dinner quickly gave way to the reality of Robert's life. The next morning, he was again in an apron at Joe's corner, serving coffee and grilled bread to regular customers. Joe observed his employee with curiosity. Something had changed in him in recent weeks. "So, are you going to tell me who she is?" asked the old proprietor during a quiet moment at the restaurant. Robert almost dropped the tray he was carrying. "Who are you talking about, Joe? The woman who's had you looking like a lovesick puppy?" The man laughed, wiping his hands on his apron. "You've worked with me for years, son. Do you really think I don't notice when one of my best employees has his head in the clouds?" Robert smiled, unable to disguise it. In the last 2 months, his life had transformed in ways he had never imagined possible. Helen had opened not only her heart, but also doors to unprecedented experiences, dinners in sophisticated restaurants, outings to places he had previously only seen in photos, conversations about art and architecture that expanded his horizons. "It's complicated," he replied, organizing napkins on the counter. "Love always is," Joe philosophized, "but by your face it's worth it." It was, even with the evident challenges, even with the disapproving looks he had received at the charity event, even with the conflicting schedules. Robert felt he had found something special in Helen, not for what she possessed, but for the person she was when they were together. Authentic, vulnerable, genuinely interested in knowing his world. That afternoon, after his shift, Robert headed to college with renewed energy. Helen had promised to meet him after his last class for a surprise. While attending the lecture on urban planning, his cell phone vibrated with a message from her. "I'm in the parking lot. Come as soon as you can." Upon leaving the building, Robert found her leaning against her car. Not the usual luxury sedan with a driver, but a compact model she drove herself. "I thought you didn't know how to drive," he joked, approaching for a brief kiss. "There are many things you still don't know about me, Robert Adams," she replied with a mysterious smile. "Get in. I have something to show you." During the journey, Helen avoided revealing her destination, distracting Robert with questions about his class and comments on Chicago's chaotic traffic. About 40 minutes later, they parked in front of a large fenced lot in the East Side. "What is this place?" asked Robert, confused. Helen opened the car door, inviting him to follow her to a gate where a security guard awaited them. After greeting him by name, she guided Robert inside the property, where signs from Montgomery Construction announced a future development. "This is the Horizons project," she explained, extending her arm to encompass the entire area. "Our newest sustainable, affordable housing development." The land had topography markings and some stakes that delimited future constructions. Helen took architectural plans from her folder and showed them to Robert. 70 low-cost but high-quality housing units, she continued. Solar panels on each roof, rainwater collection system, environmentally friendly materials. And the best part, affordable prices for low-income families with facilitated financing. Robert examined the plans with the eyes of a future engineer, impressed with the technical details and the evident concern with sustainability and comfort. "This is amazing, Helen. But why are you showing me?" She took a deep breath before answering. "Because I want you to be part of this project." As an engineering intern, Robert's eyes widened, surprised by the unexpected proposal. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering an opportunity," she corrected, "based exclusively on your academic merit and your talent. I checked your grades at college. You're one of the best students in the class, Robert." He took a few steps back, a whirlwind of emotions crossing his face. "Helen, I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" She seemed genuinely surprised by his hesitation. "People will say I got the internship because of our relationship, not because of competence." Helen crossed her arms, clearly frustrated. "And since when do you care what people think? The Robert I know fights for what he believes in, regardless of appearances. It's different when it comes to my career," he argued. "I want to earn my place on my own merit, not through privileges." The word hung between them like an invisible barrier. Helen felt the blow, understanding what he really wanted to say. He didn't want to be seen as someone who used a relationship to gain professional advantages. "I understand," she said finally, her voice more restrained. "But think of it another way. This project represents exactly what you've always dreamed of doing. Building dignified housing. For people who normally wouldn't have access to it. Wouldn't it be a waste to give up this chance out of pride?" Robert observed the land again, imagining the families who would one day live there. Families like his, who had always dreamed of having their own safe, sustainable home. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course," Helen replied, putting away the plans. "The position will be available when you decide." The return journey was made in an uncomfortable silence. Helen's proposal, although well-intentioned, had touched on a sensitive point for Robert, his independence. He had grown up watching his mother work 2 jobs to support the family after his father's departure. He had learned early on the value of self-determination and hard work. The idea of accepting a professional shortcut, even if deserved, conflicted with his most deep-rooted principles. The following week, while Robert was still pondering the internship proposal, news shook his fragile balance. College tuition would increase by 15% next semester, an amount his tight budget could not accommodate. "I'll have to pause my studies for a while," he confessed to William, his best friend and classmate, while they studied in the library. "Man, you can't give up now." "We're almost halfway through the course," protested William. "I'm not giving up," Robert corrected. "I just need to work a bit more, save money, and come back later." William observed his friend with a thoughtful expression before saying, "What about that rich girlfriend of yours? Can't she help you?" Robert closed the calculus book with more force than necessary. "She's not my rich girlfriend. And no, I'm not going to ask her for money." "Pride doesn't pay tuition, Robert," William provoked, "and from what you've told me, she would be happy to help." Robert knew his friend was right. Helen would probably pay his tuition without thinking twice if he asked, but that was exactly the dynamic he was trying to avoid, becoming dependent on her, confirming the stereotypes that people were already whispering about them, that he was with her out of interest. That night, when he arrived home, he found his mother sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread in front of her and a worried expression on her face. "Did something happen, Mom?" he asked, sitting beside her. Cindy sighed. showing bills for electricity, water, and the small loan they had taken out to renovate the bathroom that had leaks. "Money is tight this month, son. The blood pressure medicine went up in price, and your sister needs new materials for school." Robert felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. As the firstborn, he had always helped support the household. "I'll ask for overtime at the restaurant," he said, affectionately squeezing his mother's hand. "And maybe I'll accept that internship proposal I told you about." Cindy's tired eyes lit up. "The one at your ladies' company?" she asked. "She's not my lady, Mum," Robert corrected, although a slight smile betrayed his words. "But yes, at Montgomery Construction." "Son, pride is good, but it doesn't fill stomachs," Cindy philosophized, unconsciously repeating the same advice as William. If it's a legitimate opportunity, why not accept it? His mother's question echoed in his mind all night. The next morning, Robert called Helen. "Is that internship position still open?" he asked when she answered. "Good morning to you too," she joked, her voice softening as she noticed his tense tone. "Yes, it still is. Changed your mind?" "Yes, but with one condition," he replied firmly. "I want to go through the same selection process that any other candidate would go through. No favors." There was a moment of silence before Helen responded. "Deal. The selection process is next week. I'll send the details by email as we would do with any candidate." "Thank you," said Robert, feeling simultaneously relieved and anxious. "Robert?" Helen called before he hung up. "Yes?" "I'm proud of you," she said simply. Those words, so simple and sincere, meant more to him than any offer of financial help could mean. The selection process at Montgomery Construction was rigorous, theoretical. Exam, practical problem-solving test, and interview with the engineering committee. Helen kept her word and completely distanced herself from the process, delegating the conduct to Lucas Montgomery, her cousin, and the company's technical director. Robert studied like never before, spending sleepless nights reviewing concepts, preparing for any technical question that might arise. When the day of the interview finally arrived, he was exhausted but confident. The headquarters building of Montgomery Construction was imposing, 30 floors of glass and steel in the financial heart of Chicago. In the luxurious reception, Robert felt out of place in his only suit, bought at a sale years before for her uncle's wedding. "Robert Adams," called a receptionist, "the committee awaits you in the meeting room on the 25th floor." In the panoramic elevator, Robert took several deep breaths, trying to control his nervousness. It wasn't just an internship at stake, but his dignity, his future, and in a way his relationship with Helen. The committee consisted of 3 people, 2 middle-aged women with neutral expressions and a younger man whom Robert immediately recognized from the photos Helen had shown, Lucas Montgomery. The family resemblance was evident, the same penetrating eyes, the same determined chin. "So you're the famous Robert," said Lucas without preamble after the formal introductions. "Famous?" repeated Robert, feeling uncomfortable. "My cousin. Rarely gets enthusiastic about potential interns," Lucas replied with an enigmatic smile. "She said your grades are exceptional and that you have a unique vision on affordable housing." Robert swallowed hard, realizing the subtext. Lucas knew about his relationship with Helen. "I'm here for my professional qualifications, Mr. Montgomery," he replied firmly. "And that's all I'd like to be evaluated on today." Lucas nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer. "Then let's get to the point," he said, opening a folder. "Tell us about your ideas for cost reduction without compromising quality in popular housing projects." The technical questions that followed were challenging, but Robert was well prepared. He spoke passionately about alternative construction techniques, sustainable low-cost materials, and innovative solutions he had studied in academic articles. "Impressive," commented one of the evaluators when he finished his explanation of natural ventilation systems that reduced the need for air conditioning. "Where did you learn about this?" "It's not part of the regular engineering curriculum." "Supplementary readings," Robert replied. "I've always been interested in solutions that can be applied in communities with limited resources." The interview lasted almost 2 hours. When it finally ended, Robert felt mentally exhausted but satisfied with his performance. Lucas accompanied him to the elevator. "Regardless of the outcome, Adams, you have potential," said the man, extending his hand. "But some advice. Helen is like a sister to me. If your intentions with her aren't serious, reconsider." Robert shook the offered hand, looking directly at Lucas. "My intentions are as serious as my professional commitment, Mr. Montgomery. In both cases, I intend to give my best." Lucas smiled, apparently satisfied with the answer. "The results will be out in 3 days. Good luck." Those 3 days were the longest in Robert's life. He deliberately avoided contacting Helen, wanting to maintain the separation between his personal and professional lives. He focused on his work at the restaurant and his studies, trying not to think about the result. On the night of the 3rd day, his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Adams? This is Mariana from the Human Resources Department at Montgomery Construction," said a formal voice. "I have the pleasure of informing you that you have been approved in the selection process for the internship position on the Horizons project." "Congratulations." Robert sat on the edge of the bed, a mixture of relief and pride taking over him. "Can you come tomorrow at 9 a.m. to sign the necessary documents?" the woman continued. "Yes, of course. I'll be there," he replied, still processing the news. As soon as he hung up, he typed a message to Helen. "I made it, on my own merit." The response came instantly. "Never doubted it. I'm proud, but not surprised." That night, Robert slept with a smile on his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was on the right track, building something solid, both in his career and in his relationship. What he didn't know was that, in the corridors of Montgomery Construction, not everyone viewed his arrival with good eyes. Arnold Taylor, financial vice president and longtime friend of Helen's father, observed the movement with suspicion. For him, the heiress's relationship with a nobody from the South Side was an affront to the company's tradition and, potentially, a threat to his own plans. "We need to have a conversation about your personal choice, Helen," said Arnold during a private meeting, days after Robert was hired. "The board is concerned." Helen, who was organizing documents for a presentation, raised her eyes, with an icy expression. "My personal life is not the board's business, Arnold." "It becomes business when you hire your unqualified boyfriend for a strategic project," he countered. "First, Robert went through the entire regular selection process, with excellent grades evaluated by a committee in which I did not participate," she replied, her voice dangerously calm. "Second, he is one of the best engineering students in his class, and third, this conversation is over." Arnold adjusted his expensive tie, a thin smile on his lips. "Your father would be disappointed, Helen. Mixing business and pleasure was never his style." "My father was never fond of veiled intimidation either, Arnold," she replied, standing up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." When the door closed behind Arnold, Helen allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She knew this would be just the first of many battles. The corporate world could be relentless, especially with women in leadership positions. Her personal life would be constantly scrutinized, her relationship with Robert used as proof of her supposed emotional instability or lack of commitment to the company. Taking a deep breath, Helen composed herself. She was willing to face any obstacle for Robert, just as she would fight for her convictions at the helm of Montgomery Construction. The challenge would be to balance both battles without one harming the other. Meanwhile, on his first day as an intern, Robert faced his own challenges. The engineering team had received him with professionalism, but he could feel the curious looks and whispers as he passed through the corridors. "Don't mind them," advised Deborah, another intern who had been assigned to show him the facilities. "People always talk about what they don't know." "What exactly are they saying?" asked Robert, although he already imagined the answer. Deborah hesitated before answering. "That you're only here because you're dating the boss." Robert nodded, resigned. It was exactly what he had feared from the beginning. "What they don't know," continued Deborah as they entered the project room, "is that Lucas is the most demanding of the evaluators. If you pass the interview with him, you have more than enough merit. That comment relieved some of the tension Robert felt. Throughout the day, he focused on absorbing as much information as possible, determined to prove his worth through work and dedication. At night, when everyone had already left, he remained in the project room, studying the Horizons project plans in detail. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice Helen's arrival until she lightly touched his shoulder. "Productive first day?" she asked, smiling. Robert stood up, hesitating between hugging her or maintaining professional distance. "Very," he replied, opting for a middle ground, an affectionate but contained smile. "This project is even more incredible than I imagined." Helen looked around to ensure they were alone before briefly kissing him. "In the office, we're just co-workers," she whispered. "I promised you I would keep our personal life separate from the professional, and I'll keep that promise." Robert nodded, grateful for the understanding. "People are already talking," he commented. "People always talk," Helen replied with a shrug. "What's important is that we know the truth." The truth, a construction as solid and at the same time as fragile as the projects they developed. At that moment, both Robert and Helen believed that their love and integrity would be enough to face any obstacle. Little did they know that the greatest test was yet to come, in the form of a threat that would put at risk not only their relationship, but also everything both had built until then. Because in the shadows of the corporate corridors, Arnold Taylor was not alone in his disapproval. Powerful allies inside and outside the company shared his vision that Helen's romantic distraction needed to be eliminated, and they were willing to use methods much less subtle than a simple conversation to get what they wanted. As Robert and Helen discreetly said goodbye in the empty company parking lot, aware of the looks they would face the next day, forces were already moving against them. Forces that would test not only their love, but also their most fundamental principles. Robert's first weeks as an intern at Montgomery Construction were a constant balancing act. During the day, he strived to be exemplary. He arrived before everyone, left after most, studied every detail of the project, offered pertinent suggestions, and maintained a respectful distance from Helen in the professional environment. At night, when they managed to steal moments together, they shared not only affection but also dreams and plans for the future, a future that, despite the challenges, seemed increasingly tangible. On one of these nights, walking along Lake Michigan after a simple dinner at a discreet restaurant, Helen surprised Robert with an unexpected question. "Have you thought about living with me?" Robert stopped walking, completely caught by surprise. "Are you serious?" Helen intertwined her fingers with his, her look revealing a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "I've never been more serious. I know it's an important step, and I understand if you think it's too soon, but—" "It's not that," he gently interrupted. "It's that. Your apartment is in Lincoln Park. I live in the South Side. They're completely different worlds." "So what?" she questioned, her voice soft but decisive. "Aren't we precisely trying to build a bridge between these worlds?" Robert took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. The idea of waking up every day beside Helen was tempting, but the implications were complex. "What about my family?" he asked. "I help my mother with the bills, with taking care of my siblings." "We can find a solution," Helen replied. "Maybe a larger place, where we could occasionally receive them, or continue helping financially, even living elsewhere." Robert felt a pang of discomfort with the suggestion. Helen always tried to solve problems with financial resources, a natural approach for someone who had never needed to worry about money, but which often made him feel diminished. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "It's not a decision I can make quickly." Helen nodded, hiding her disappointment. She had hoped for a more enthusiastic reaction, but she understood his hesitations. After all, it wasn't just about a new address, but a complete transformation in his lifestyle. "Take all the time you need," she said, kissing him softly. "It's not an ultimatum, just a possibility I'd like to consider." The next morning at the office, Robert was dedicated to reviewing structural calculations when he was surprised by the arrival of Arnold Taylor at his desk. The financial vice president rarely visited the technical department and had never directly addressed Robert. "Mr. Adams, could you accompany me to my office?" Arnold requested in a formal tone. "There are some budgetary issues about the Horizons project I'd like to discuss." Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, Robert followed him through the elegant corridors to the executive floor. Arnold's office was spacious, decorated with dark wooden furniture and an impressive view of the city. "Please sit down," Arnold indicated, assuming his position behind the imposing mahogany desk. "Coffee?" "No, thank you," Robert declined, remaining alert. There was something in the man's excessive cordiality that made him uncomfortable. Arnold smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll get straight to the point, Mr. Adams. The board is concerned with the costs of the Horizons project. Helen has admirable social vision, but sometimes she lacks financial pragmatism. With all due respect, sir, the feasibility studies show that the project is economically sustainable," Robert carefully replied. "The solar panels and water collection systems, for example, increase the initial cost, but drastically reduce operational expenses in the long run." Arnold leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Impressive. Clearly you are as idealistic as she is," he commented, in a tone that mixed condescension and slight irritation. "But let's talk about what really matters. How much do you value your future in this company?" The question caught Robert by surprise. "Quite a bit. That's why I'm so dedicated to the project." "And how much do you value your relationship with our CEO?" Robert felt his blood freeze in his veins. There it was, the attack that both had anticipated for weeks. "With all due respect, Mr. Taylor, my personal life is not under discussion." "Here," he replied firmly. Arnold laughed, a dry sound devoid of humor. "Your personal life became this company's business the moment you decided to get involved with the Montgomery family heiress." He opened a drawer, taking out a folder. "Do you know what this is?" Robert remained silent, feeling a growing sense of threat. "It's a detailed report about you," Arnold continued. "Your financial history, your student debts, the financing for your home's bathroom, your mother's precarious health, your siblings' school report cards." He slowly flipped through the papers. "Interesting how someone with so many financial needs suddenly gets an internship at his millionaire girlfriend's company, don't you think?" "What exactly are you insinuating?" asked Robert, struggling to control the anger that was beginning to boil. "I'm not insinuating anything," Arnold replied with false innocence. "Just observing facts. Helen is young, idealistic, and, clearly, susceptible to emotional distractions. The board is concerned that these distractions may compromise the company's future." Robert stood up, unable to continue listening. "If there's nothing specific about the project to discuss, I request permission to return to work." "There's a junior engineer position at our Anchorage branch," Arnold suddenly said, stopping Robert in his movement. "Salary 3 times higher than your current internship. Corporate apartment included. Health insurance extended to family. It would be an excellent career start for someone with your talent." The offer hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Robert instantly understood. It was a bribe disguised as an opportunity. To remove him from Helen, to buy him with benefits that would solve all his financial problems. "It sounds like a great opportunity," Robert carefully replied. "But I prefer to earn my promotions on merit, not through backroom arrangements." Arnold closed the folder with an abrupt movement. "Nobility is a luxury for those who can afford it, Mr. Adams. Your family doesn't have that luxury." The words hit Robert like a punch. It was a veiled threat, but unmistakable. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Taylor?" "Threatening?" "Not at all," replied the executive, standing up to indicate the meeting was over. "Just offering clarity about your options. Think about it. You have until the end of the week to decide." Robert left the office feeling physically nauseated. The bribery attempt was repulsive in itself, but the detailed investigation into his personal life and family was something that bordered on persecution. He needed to tell Helen immediately. However, when he reached the presidency floor, he was informed that she had left for an external meeting and would only return the next day. Reluctant to discuss the matter by phone, Robert decided to wait, although anxiety consumed him for the rest of the day. That night, when he returned home, he found Cindy sitting in the living room with a worried expression, holding an envelope. "What is it, Mom?" he asked, sitting next to her. "We received this today," she replied, handing him the envelope. "It's from Maria's school." Robert opened the document, feeling his heart sink as he read the contents. His younger sister, an exemplary student, had lost the scholarship she was so proud of having won. The letter mentioned re-evaluation of socio-economic criteria as justification. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, rereading the letter. "Maria has the best grades in the class. The principal called me in for a chat today," explained Cindy. "She said there was a significant investment from an influential family that required reviewing all scholarships. As a result, Maria's spot went to—" "What did she say?" "Oh yes, a family with more urgent needs." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. The coincidence was too disturbing. "When did this happen?" "The principal called me this afternoon, but from what I understood, the decision was made yesterday." "Yesterday? Just when Arnold had requested his detailed report. The pieces fit together in a disturbing manner." "I'll fix this, Mum," promised Robert, hugging her firmly. "Maria won't lose her spot." That night, Robert couldn't sleep. His mind alternated between indignation and fear. It was evident that Arnold had begun his retaliation, affecting him through his family. What would come next? His mother's health, the job at the restaurant. The next morning, he arrived early at the office, determined to speak with Helen as soon as she arrived. However, upon accessing his corporate email, he found a message that froze his blood. The Human Resources Department informed that he had been transferred to a shopping center project in the West Side, a project that had nothing to do with social housing or sustainability, the areas that had attracted him to the company. "Sorry, direct order from finance," explained the HR coordinator when he questioned the change. "Something about redistribution of human resources for budget optimization." Robert knew exactly what was happening. It was Arnold's next move, to remove him from the project that Helen personally supervised, to cut his direct access to her in the professional environment. When he finally managed to find Helen in a break between meetings, she was already aware of the transfer and equally furious. "I'll reverse this immediately," she guaranteed, after hearing Robert's complete account, including the episode of Maria's lost scholarship. "Arnold has crossed all ethical and professional boundaries." "And if this is just the beginning?" questioned Robert, concerned. "Helen, he investigated my family. He knows our vulnerabilities." Helen ran her hands through her hair, a rare gesture that revealed her disturbance. "Robert, maybe we should make our relationship officially public," she suggested. "End this shadow game. If we're open about who we are as a couple, we reduce the power that people like Arnold have over us." The suggestion made complete sense to Robert, but it also brought new concerns. "And the consequences for you, for your position in the company." "I'm the CEO and main shareholder," she replied with determination. "If the board has a problem with whom I choose to share my life with, maybe it's time to restructure the board." There was a renewed strength in Helen, a determination that Robert deeply admired. But before they could elaborate a concrete plan, they were interrupted by Helen's assistant, informing about an emergency at the Horizons project construction site. "We need to postpone this conversation," said Helen, already gathering her folder. "But I promise we'll resolve this together. I won't let Arnold intimidate either of us." As Helen left to deal with the emergency, Robert returned to his new workstation, trying to concentrate on the shopping center plans. However, his mind was buzzing with concerns. What else would Arnold do? How far would he go to separate them? The answer came sooner than he imagined. At the end of the workday, he received a call from Joe, the owner of Joe's Corner. "Robert, son, I need to tell you something." The elderly man's voice sounded shaken. "I received an offer to buy the restaurant today. A big offer, much above market value." "That's good, isn't it?" asked Robert, not understanding his boss's distress. "The lawyer who came to make the offer made it very clear that if I sell, the new administration won't have room for employees like you. He told me to warn you about this, as if it were a threat." Robert closed his eyes, feeling a wave of fury and helplessness. Arnold was methodically destroying every aspect of his life. "Don't accept the offer because of me, Joe," he said, trying to sound calmer than he actually was. "You've worked your whole life for this restaurant. If the offer is good—" "I already refused," the old proprietor interrupted. "I don't know who this Taylor Investments Group is, but I didn't like their style. Joe's Corner is not for sale, at least not to people who do business through intimidation. Taylor Investments Group." The surname left no doubt about the origin of the offer. Arnold was using his personal resources to pressure Robert from all possible sides. "Thank you, Joe," said Robert, genuinely moved by his boss's loyalty. "Don't thank me, son. Just be careful. Whoever this guy is, he seems determined to harm you." After hanging up, Robert tried to contact Helen, but all his calls went to voicemail. Later, he discovered she was in a remote area of the construction site without adequate cell phone signal. As he walked to the bus stop, he felt watched. The sensation of vulnerability was oppressive. In less than 48 hours, Arnold Taylor had demonstrated that he could affect his family, his work, and even his parallel job. What would come next? The answer arrived the next morning, in the form of an anonymous email sent to his personal address. The message contained only a link to a report that would be published the next day on a corporate gossip website. The title was devastating. "Secret Romance Shakes Montgomery Construction. CEO maintains affair with humble origin intern." The text, full of malicious insinuations and half-truths, suggested that Robert had been hired exclusively due to his involvement with Helen, questioned his professional capacity, and insinuated that he was using the relationship to obtain financial advantages and access to Chicago's elite social circle. With trembling hands, Robert forwarded the link to Helen, adding only, "We need to talk urgent." Helen responded almost immediately, asking that they meet at her apartment after work, a place where they could talk without being observed or heard. The luxurious penthouse apartment in Lincoln Park, which normally impressed Robert, seemed suffocating that night. Helen was already waiting for him, visibly upset. "I've already seen the report," she said as soon as he entered. "My lawyers are preparing a lawsuit against the website, but the damage is already done. Tomorrow this will be in all the city's corporate gossip outlets." Robert sat heavily on the Italian designer's sofa, feeling the weight of the last few days on his shoulders. "It's not just the report, Helen," he said, relating in detail all the events. The conversation with Arnold, Maria's lost scholarship, the attempt to buy the restaurant, his project transfer. "He's literally destroying my life piece by piece." Helen listened with growing indignation, her eyes darkening with anger at each new revelation. "This is persecution. Robert, we can sue him for workplace harassment, for abuse of power." "And while the lawsuits proceed, what happens to my family?" questioned Robert. "To Maria, who might lose the school year. To my mother, who depends on blood pressure medication." A heavy silence settled between them. The cruel reality finally imposed itself. Arnold had resources, connections, and power to drag any legal battle out for years, while Robert's family would suffer immediate consequences. "There's another option," said Helen after a few moments, her voice suddenly resolute. "I can fire Arnold. As CEO, I have that prerogative." "And the board? You yourself said he has powerful allies." "I can face them too," she replied, beginning to pace around the apartment. "I have enough shares to force a board restructuring if necessary. My father entrusted this company to me, not to executives who use intimidation tactics." Robert observed, her admiring her determination, but also concerned about the consequences. What if this harms the company, the employees, the ongoing projects? Helen stopped, looking at him with a complex expression, a mixture of love and frustration. "Why do you always worry about everyone else before thinking about yourself?" she asked, sitting next to him. "Arnold is literally trying to destroy your life, and you're worried about the stability of the company that employs you." "Because that's who I am," he replied simply. "And it's one of the reasons you fell in love with me, isn't it?" Helen sighed, intertwining her fingers with his. "Yes, but sometimes your nobility drives me crazy," she smiled weakly. "Robert, I can't stand by while someone hurts the person I love. I need to do something." It was at that moment that Robert realized the extent of what was at stake. It wasn't just his job or his reputation, but also Helen's position in the company, her family legacy, everything she had worked for. Maybe, he hesitated, the words difficult to pronounce. Maybe the simplest solution is for me to accept the transfer to Anchorage. Helen abruptly released his hand. You can't be serious, she exclaimed, standing up. That would be giving Arnold exactly what he wants. It would be a strategic retreat, argued Robert, hating every word he said but feeling it was the only rational way out. I would stay away for a while. You would neutralize Arnold gradually, without direct confrontation, and then... Then... What? Interrupted Helen, tears of frustration shining in her eyes. Do you really think Arnold will stop? That after successfully removing you, he won't find another aspect of my life to control? Robert stood up too, approaching her. Helen, we're being realistic. He has the power to harm my family now, immediately. We can't risk it. Helen shook her head, refusing to accept. No, Robert. If we back down now, we'll be giving in to blackmail. That never ends well. The tension between them was palpable. For the first time since they had met, they were on opposite sides of a crucial decision. What do you suggest, then? He asked, his voice loaded with contained emotion. Helen faced him, her eyes reflecting an unwavering determination. Counterattack. Not in the shadows like Arnold, but in the open. We'll face him with truth, transparency, and integrity. She took a deep breath. And we'll start by officially announcing our relationship. No hiding, no being ashamed. We'll show everyone that. We're together by choice, not out of interest. The proposal was bold, a direct confrontation with all the forces trying to separate them. Robert felt simultaneously fear and admiration for her courage. And if it doesn't work, he asked softly, if the cost is too high? Helen approached, holding his face between her hands. Then at least we'll have fought for something we believe in, for us. At that moment, faced with her determination, Robert felt his own resolution weaken. He was used to fighting his own battles, to facing difficulties alone. The idea of putting Helen in the line of fire for him was disturbing. I need time to think, he said finally. Everything is happening too fast. Helen nodded, understanding his need to process all the implications. All right, but don't take too long. The report comes out tomorrow and we need to be prepared. Robert left the apartment with a heavy heart, carrying the weight of an impossible decision. As he walked through the illuminated streets of the upscale neighborhood toward the bus stop, his cell phone vibrated with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Wise decision to back off now, Mr. Adams. The documents for your transfer to Anchorage will be ready in the morning. Your family will thank your good sense. A.T. His blood froze in his veins. Somehow, Arnold knew about his conversation with Helen. Was the apartment bugged? Was someone watching them? Paranoia quickly set in, increasing the sensation of being cornered. That night, alone in his small room in the South Side, Robert faced the most difficult of crossroads. On one side, the possibility of yielding to blackmail, temporarily distancing himself and protecting his family from immediate retaliation. On the other, staying and fighting alongside Helen, exposing himself to even greater risks, but keeping his integrity intact. Any decision would have profound and irreversible consequences. And the time to choose was rapidly running out. Morning dawned gray over Chicago, reflecting Robert's state of mind as he waited at the bus stop. He had slept little, his mind full of scenarios and possibilities, all equally disturbing. In his coat pocket, his cell phone vibrated, with a new message from Helen. We need to talk before you make any decision, please. He sighed deeply. He loved Helen, that was incontestable. But was this love strong enough to face the storms forming on the horizon? And more importantly, was it worth putting his family at risk for this love? He arrived at Montgomery Construction determined to keep his head down while reflecting. However, he soon realized that something was different. Employees observed him openly, some whispering among themselves, others offering looks of sympathy or curiosity. The promised report had clearly been published. Upon reaching his workstation in the shopping center department, he found an official envelope from Human Resources. Inside, as Arnold had promised, were the documents for his immediate transfer to Anchorage. The message was clear. Signing meant accepting exile, backing down in the face of intimidation. Robert? The soft voice of Deborah, the intern who had welcomed him on his first day, interrupted his thoughts. Helen is looking for you. It seems urgent. In the elevator on the way to Helen's office, Robert felt observed by invisible cameras. The sensation of being involved in a game whose rules he didn't know was suffocating. When the doors opened on the executive floor, he was surprised to find not only Helen, but also Lucas Montgomery waiting for him. "Come in," invited Helen, her professional tone contradictory to the evident concern in her gaze. "And close the door, please." Lucas was sitting informally on the edge of Helen's desk, arms crossed and a serious expression. Robert had always felt a mixture of respect and apprehension toward Helen's cousin, a man known for his fierce loyalty to family and company. "I'll get straight to the point," Lucas began as soon as Robert sat down. "I read this morning's report. Sensationalist trash, obviously, but dangerous. I'm also aware of Arnold's maneuvers against you." Robert cast a questioning look at Helen, who promptly responded. "Lucas is the only person I completely trust in the company. I told him everything. We needed an ally." Lucas stood up, walking to the panoramic window that offered a privileged view of the city. "Arnold Taylor worked with my uncle, Helen's father, for years. He was always ambitious, but lately he has crossed lines that should never be crossed." He turned to face Robert directly. "What he's doing to you and your family is criminal, literally. We have enough evidence to sue him for workplace harassment, abuse of power, and possibly even extortion." Robert felt a spark of hope, quickly suppressed by practical reality. "Lawsuits. Take time," he commented. "My sister has already lost her scholarship. Who knows what else he can do while lawyers argue in courts?" "That's why we need an immediate solution," Helen intervened. "And I believe we've found one." She exchanged a look with Lucas, who nodded in silent approval. "What are you planning?" asked Robert, skeptical and curious at the same time. Helen took a deep breath before answering. "A complete restructuring of the company's administrative council and executive board, effective immediately." Robert blinked, processing the magnitude of that statement. "You can do that?" "With the support of the main shareholders, yes," Helen replied. "Lucas, my Aunt Christina and I control 63% of the shares. It's more than enough to approve significant structural changes. The documents have already been prepared," added Lucas, showing a folder he carried with him. "We just need your final approval, Helen." Robert observed the exchange between the cousins, feeling simultaneously admired and apprehensive. Helen was willing to revolutionize the power structure of the company her father had built, all to protect him. "Wait," he asked, standing up. "Are you sure about this? It's an extreme decision, Helen. I don't want you to sacrifice the company's stability because of me." Helen approached, her eyes revealing an unwavering determination. "It's not just for you, Robert. It's for the company. 2. Arnold and his allies on the board have systematically blocked social housing and sustainability projects that I consider fundamental for the future of Montgomery construction. They use their power to maintain outdated and, in some cases, ethically questionable practices. This restructuring has been in the plans for months," complimented Lucas. "The attack on you just accelerated the process and confirmed what we already suspected. Arnold does not share the vision we have for the company's future." "Still," Robert hesitated. "Still nothing," interrupted Helen firmly. "I won't yield to blackmail and intimidation. That's not how I was raised, not how I live my life or run this company." Her conviction was contagious. Robert felt his own determination grow, the hesitation gradually giving way to resolution. "What about my family?" he asked, the concern still evident in his voice. "Arnold has already proven he can reach them." "We've taken care of that too," replied Lucas. "I personally spoke with the principal of your sister's school this morning. The Montgomery Foundation offered 10 full scholarships for low-income students, with the condition that all recently cancelled scholarships be immediately restored. She promptly accepted. Robert felt an enormous weight being lifted from his shoulders. Maria would not lose her educational opportunity. And what about Joe's Corner? He asked, remembering the hostile takeover attempt of the restaurant where he worked. The mysterious Taylor Investments Group withdrew its offer an hour ago, informed Helen with a small smile. Coincidentally, right after I had a quite frank conversation with Arnold, mentioning that our legal department was investigating possible conflicts of interest between his personal businesses and his position in the company. A nervous laugh escaped Robert's lips. It was almost hard to believe. In less than 24 hours, Helen and Lucas had systematically dismantled all the threats that Arnold had built over weeks. "What happens now?" he asked. Helen consulted her elegant watch. "Now, we have an extraordinary meeting of the Administrative Council in 15 minutes. A meeting in which we will announce the restructuring and, incidentally, accept Arnold Taylor's resignation." "Resignation?" repeated Robert, surprised. "He agreed to resign?" Lucas smiled, a smile that combined satisfaction and determination. "Let's say we found some irregularities in the financial operations supervised by him. Irregularities that he certainly prefers to keep confidential." "In other words," explained Helen, "we gave him the option to leave discreetly or face a complete audit and possible legal processes. He chose wisely." Robert was momentarily speechless. The efficiency and determination of the pair were impressive, almost frightening. He now realized why Montgomery Construction was a powerhouse in the market. Its leaders did not back down from challenges. "And us?" he finally asked. "What happens with our relationship?" Helen smiled for the first time that morning. "That's where we need your help, Robert. After the board meeting, we'll make an official announcement to the company, not just about the restructuring, but also about us too." "An announcement," he repeated, nervous about the idea. "Total transparency," confirmed Helen. "No hiding, no being ashamed. We'll explain exactly how we met, how you earned your position on your own merit, and how we intend to maintain a clear separation between our personal and professional lives. End the rumors once and for all," added Lucas. "Control the narrative, instead of allowing others to distort it." The idea made sense to Robert, although it still made him uncomfortable. Exposing something so personal and precious to public scrutiny went against his reserved nature. "And if it doesn't work?" he asked, echoing the same concern he had expressed the night before. "Then we'll face it together," replied Helen, holding his hand. "What do you say? Are you ready for this battle?" Robert looked at their intertwined hands, then at Helen's determined eyes. At that moment he made his decision. "I am," he replied firmly. The following hours were a whirlwind of events. The board meeting, as predicted by Helen, was tense but decisive. Supported by Lucas and her Aunt Christina, Helen presented her restructuring plan with an authority that left little room for objections. The evidence of Arnold's irregularities, carefully compiled by Lucas, sealed the fate of the financial vice president, who left the meeting room visibly shaken, but without public resistance. After the meeting, all headquarters employees were summoned for a special announcement in the main auditorium. Robert, beside Helen on the stage, felt exposed and vulnerable, but also determined. When Helen finally took the floor, her voice was clear and confident. "As many of you may have already heard through rumors or read in sensationalist reports, I am in a relationship with Robert Adams, who currently works as an intern in our company. Today I want to address this matter directly with you, our team, who deserve transparency and respect." She proceeded to explain how they had met, the casual encounter at the bus stop, Robert's spontaneous generosity, the gradual development of their relationship. She also detailed the rigorous selection process he had gone through, emphasizing his refusal to accept any kind of favoritism. "Robert is at Montgomery Construction for his talent, dedication, and ethical vision of engineering, qualities that our company values and seeks in all its collaborators," she concluded. "And to ensure there are no conflicts of interest, we are implementing a new corporate policy today. Robert will report directly to Lucas Montgomery, not to me, in all professional matters." When Helen finished, A momentary silence took over the auditorium, soon followed by something that surprised Robert: applause. Not enthusiastic and unanimous applause, certainly, but genuine support from a good part of those present. Later, at the end of the day, Helen and Robert walked together through Lincoln Park, processing the intense events of the last hours. "You were amazing today," he commented, admiration evident in his voice. "The way you conducted everything, how you—" "Didn't back down even for a second." Helen smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "I learned from my father that leadership is not just about making difficult decisions, but also about standing up for what's right, even when it's inconvenient." "What do you think he would think about us?" asked Robert, verbalizing a doubt that had accompanied him for months. Helen stopped walking, turning to face him. "My father valued integrity and determination above all. He would see in you the same qualities I see: a man who doesn't bow before adversities, who defends his principles, who works tirelessly for what he believes in." She smiled, emotional. "I'm sure he would approve. Not immediately, perhaps. He would put you through a rigorous interrogation first." Robert laughed, imagining the scene. "Like Lucas did on my first day?" "Much worse," she guaranteed, laughing too. "But you would have passed the test, just as you passed all the others that life has put in your path." And they continued walking in silence for a few minutes, absorbing the tranquility of the park, a welcome contrast to the turbulence of recent days. "You still haven't answered my question from yesterday," Helen commented softly. Robert raised his eyebrows, confused. "What question?" "About living together," she reminded him. "I understand your concerns about your family, about the different worlds we inhabit, but after everything we've faced, wouldn't it be time to build our own world?" Robert considered the question carefully. The last 48 hours had been an emotional roller coaster, testing limits he didn't even know existed. But instead of weakening their relationship, the trials seemed to have strengthened it, crystallizing the certainty that what they felt for each other was genuine and resilient. "What if we found a middle ground?" he finally suggested. "A place that's neither the South Side nor Lincoln Park, a new place ours." Helen's smile brightened. "That sounds perfect," she replied. "In fact, I've been thinking of something that might combine with that idea." In the days that followed, the dust began to settle. As predicted, the restructuring of Montgomery Construction generated headlines in business newspapers. Helen and Robert's relationship was mentioned in most reports, but as a secondary aspect, not as the scandal that Arnold had tried to fabricate. In the company, reactions were mixed. Some employees remained skeptical, whispering about favoritism. Others, especially those who worked directly with Robert, defended his professionalism and competence. Overall, a pragmatic acceptance prevailed, as long as both maintained the clear separation between personal and professional life. Most were willing to move forward. 2 weeks after the tumultuous events, Helen took Robert to see a spacious lot in Wicker Park, a bohemian and artistic neighborhood that was at a relatively convenient distance from both the corporate center and the South Side where his family lived. "What do you think?" she asked, as they walked through the empty space. "We could build something here. Not a luxury apartment, not a mansion, just a house. Our house." The idea touched Robert deeply. It was perfect, a place that didn't belong completely to her world or his, but could incorporate elements of both, creating something new and unique. "I could design it," he suggested, already visualizing possibilities. "Something sustainable like the projects we believe in, solar panels, rainwater collection." "A living laboratory of our ideals," completed Helen, enthusiastic, "and with enough space to comfortably receive your family." At that moment, observing Helen trace with her hands in the air the imaginary contours of their future home, Robert felt a certainty that transcended doubts and insecurities. They had faced threats, prejudices, manipulations, and emerged stronger, more united. "I have another idea too," said Helen, her look revealing a deep emotion. "About the Horizons project." "What about it?" asked Robert, curious. "I want to expand it," she replied. not just as a Montgomery development, but as an independent foundation focused exclusively on sustainable social housing, an organization that can work with governments, universities, and communities to replicate the model in different regions. Robert's eyes shone with the possibility. It was exactly the kind of work he had dreamed of since he decided to study engineering, using technical knowledge to improve lives, to build more dignified futures. "And I'd like you to lead the technical department of this foundation," Helen continued. "Not as my boyfriend, nor as a Montgomery employee, but as the talented and visionary engineer that you are." The offer was tempting, aligned with his principles and deepest dreams, but Robert still had one reservation. "I haven't even graduated yet." "The foundation will only begin to operate effectively a year from now," explained Helen. "Enough. Time for you to finish your degree and, if you want, start a specialization in sustainable engineering." "I'm thinking about the future, Robert. Our future." Future. The word resonated between them like a promise, not a perfect or challenge-free future, certainly, but one built on the solid foundations they had established together: mutual respect, shared values, unwavering determination, and above all, genuine love. "I'm in," replied Robert, hugging her firmly. 6 months later, the Horizons project was officially inaugurated. 70 families received the keys to their new homes: dignified, sustainable, and most importantly, affordable housing. At the inauguration ceremony, Helen and Robert remained discreetly in the last row, preferring to leave the spotlight for the new residents, whose stories of struggle and overcoming were the true heart of that development. Observing children, running through the common spaces, elderly people chatting on porches designed to maximize community coexistence, young couples planning the future in an environment they could finally call home, Robert felt a deep satisfaction. That project symbolized everything he and Helen had faced and what they would still build together, a bridge between different worlds, proving that with vision, determination, and courage, apparently insurmountable barriers could be overcome. On sea, the way back home, the home they were building together in Wicker Park, with the contribution of ideas from both him and her, Robert reflected on the improbable journey that had united them. How a simple act of kindness at a bus stop had transformed into a love that defied conventions and prejudices, how they had resisted attempts at manipulation and intimidation, emerging stronger and more determined. "What are you thinking about?" asked Helen, noticing his contemplative silence while driving. "About how life surprises us," he replied, holding her hand. "And how grateful I am that you forgot your wallet that day." Helen smiled, remembering the encounter that had changed their lives. "Destiny, perhaps?" she suggested. "Maybe," agreed Robert, "or just proof that sometimes it's the smallest gestures that change everything. A few coins offered without expecting anything in return can build bridges that seemed impossible." Helen squeezed his hand, a silent communication of everything they shared: past, present, and, most importantly, future. A future they would continue to build together, brick by brick, challenge by challenge, overcoming differences and taking advantage of complementarities, exactly as the engineer and executive they were, with careful planning, clear vision, and the unwavering determination to create something that would withstand the test of time. Because in the end, true love is not one that ignores differences or avoids obstacles. It's one that recognizes challenges and decides to face them side by side, patiently building a common path where before there were only separate worlds. And that's how Robert and Helen wrote their own story, not as a fairy tale of magical solutions, but as a real narrative of two people committed to building together, day after day, a love as solid as the structures they designed and as revolutionary as the changes they implemented in the world around them. Dear listeners, we hope that Robert and Helen's journey touched your hearts and perhaps even inspired reflections on how small acts of kindness can transform entire lives. To continue exploring narratives that intertwine love, overcoming, and personal growth, we've prepared a special selection of equally captivating stories. Find them in our special playlist, available through the link on the left. If this story sparked emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and gift this video with your like. Daily, we bring new narratives that explore the complexities of life and the infinite possibilities of the human heart. Also share in the comments. Have you ever lived or witnessed a situation where a small gesture of kindness ended up changing the course of a story? We're eager to hear about your experiences and continue this conversation with you. Until the next emotional journey.